men will click away from this video about toxic masculinity?
No, just the ones that don't want to be exposed to internet cancer.
Because we know that men are also hurt by sexist gender roles and a lack of gender equality.
The only men that are hurt by gender roles are the men who give a shit about gender roles. And I'm pretty sure in this day and age I can count the number of men who give a shit about gender roles with one hand.
From small things like having to pretend you like BattleBots.
Battle who?
To pretending you have allergies every time you watch The Notebook. To real traumas that can lead to things like mass shootings. We're talking about the men and the white supremacists who suffer from, perpetuate, and prey on toxic masculinity.
Whoa, white supremacy, mass shooting, toxic masculinity, one buzzword at a time, lady.
It's not an easy time to be a man. Women's marches, the Me Too movement, I can see how some men might feel lost when it comes to knowing the role they play, or might feel like the treehouse of victimhood has a sign on it that says, "No boys allowed."
Wait, so you don't like the Women's March or the Me Too movement? What is this, an MRA video?
The truth is, man, you've been in the treehouse this whole time. Your side just has a roof and a PS4.
Yeah, fuck Microsoft.
Because men suffer from patriarchy in similar and yet very different ways.
So men have similar problems to women, but at the same time they have different problems to women. On what planet does that make sense?
And I'm not saying that. He is.
What about all the boys who are profoundly affected in a negative way by what some adult man is doing against their mother, themselves, their sisters? What about all those boys? What about all the young men and boys who have been traumatized by adult men's violence? You know what? The same system that produces men who abuse women produces men who abuse other men.
I know this motherfucker is not walking around claiming to be an anti-sexism educator. Since when do you need a teacher to tell you how not to be sexist? If you don't hate women, you're not a sexist. You don't need...
He's right. Women and men are both victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and men are the ones who are more often the perpetrators towards everyone.
Not by a very wide margin, though.
So if we know what we have in common, what are the problems that are unique to men? While women are told to be obedient, that they're too emotional, and that they already have 3 crop tops exactly like that.
Exactly who was telling them that?
What are the messages that men and boys get?
Growing up as a boy, we was taught that men had to be tough, had to be strong, had to be courageous, dominating.
And women aren't encouraged to be strong, dominant, or courageous?
No pain, no emotions, with the exception of anger and definitely no fear.
And since the plebes among us still watch commercials, we know that real men should shave like a man, smell like a man, wash like a man / feel like a man, have the essence of man.
Yes, because men and women use different hygiene products.
And if you're ever tempted to drink something unmanly like sangria, instead grab a glass of Adam Carolla's Mangria.
A little red wine, a little vodka, a little orange juice, a little pixie dust, and pow, Mangria. But I'm telling you, it's good for what ails you.
I've worked at a restaurant that sells sangria for about 4 years now, and I've literally never seen a man publicly chastised for drinking sangria.
Thank God those messages just come from commercials and not the news.
I have some hard and fast rules for the way men should dress. No open-toed shoes, no jewelry other than a wedding ring or a watch, no highlights, and no makeup. And I am sad that we live in a culture where I actually need to articulate these things.
First and foremost, Fox News does not count as news. No one takes them seriously. Second of all, why is this bitch on Fox News talking about relationships? Do the idiots on Fox News seriously have nothing better to talk about?
And I'm also sad you articulated those things because they're supremely tone deaf. Forget campus rape, unequal pay, or domestic violence. Birkenstocks are the real enemy. So society tells men they must behave in a certain way, but what about the ways they're told to behave towards women?
That men are superior, women are inferior. That men are strong, women are weak. That women are of less value.
So I'm supposed to sit here and believe that every man you have ever met in your life has told you that men are more valuable than women? And do women around you just echo this sentiment or something? Like, what the fuck?
Property of men and objects, particularly sexual objects.
And that makes total sense if you've watched any TV or movies since TV or movies were a thing. Men are encouraged to see women as headless body parts, sexy love interests who can and probably should be stalked, conquered, and kissed even though they don't want to be. And in practically every coming-of-age movie, a man's worth is purely defined by whether or not he has sex.
This is our last party as high school people. Just fucking come with me on this voyage and just stop being a pussy for once and we can fucking fuck some girls already.
I find it interesting how all the movies you pointed out to support your claim there are either really shitty movies or comedies that are not supposed to be taken seriously.
And all of that pressure takes a toll on men.
As a boy, all I wanted was to be accepted and liked by the other boys. But that acceptance meant I had to acquire this almost disgusted view of the feminine.
Sounds like you need better friends, buddy.
I thought I had to put on a show for everyone. I could not be myself, and I wanted to put on what society said was masculinity.
That doesn't sound like society oppressing you. That sounds more like you caring way too much what other people think.
The fear of feeling anything is, if I start crying, I may never stop. I might just cry and cry.
Again, that's just you caring way too much about what other people think.
When all these traditionally masculine traits are taken to the extreme, you end up with what psychologists and journalists have called toxic masculinity.
Lady, are you seriously citing a website that can't even pay their fucking bills?
A specific model of manhood geared towards complete dominance and control that devalues women and emotions and overvalues extreme self-reliance. In other words, toxic masculinity is Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. That guy was the worst. Who eats raw eggs? That is not good for you. Next stop, Salmonella City. Boop, boop. And toxic masculinity has been used to talk about a driving factor behind some of the most violent behavior. We already know that half of female murder victims are killed by a male partner or former intimate partner.
So every man who's ever killed a woman did it because society told him to?
But now we have the grim patterns found in mass shootings. Since 1982, 97% of mass shooters in the US have been men. And of mass shootings between 2009 and 2016, over half of the perpetrators had histories of domestic violence. We know the Pulse nightclub shooter who killed 49 people abused his wife and was deeply homophobic.
Yeah, because he was an ISIS fanboy.
We know that the Texas man who shot 26 churchgoers had previously assaulted his wife and infant son.
Murder-suicide is not seen as a masculine trait. No one's going to make fun of you because you didn't do a mass shooting. If anything, the opposite is true.
Now, what transpired on Sunday, you had a weak, cowardly, beta male simp that broke up with his lady. And instead of being a man and moving on, maybe get another relationship down the line, he wants to go and take it out on innocent people who had nothing to do with his situation.
A disturbed young man who had been rejected by a classmate after making repeated aggressive advances.
Imagine being so much of a virgin that you kill people. Imagine being that much of a fucking gimp that you want to enact revenge on society when the only person to blame is yourself because you made no effort whatsoever to actually try and improve yourself.
Been involved with domestic violence back and forth for several years. And this is the outcome of domestic violence. We're just gonna have to build a strong family and just keep praying.
Godbolt has been charged with 1 count of capital murder and 7 counts of first-degree murder. In Lincoln County, Jessica Bowman, 3 on your side.
We see this over and over and over again as of late. A bunch of weak men can't take when a woman don't want to be with you anymore. You don't have to resort to killing police officers or killing innocent people. This weak beta male simp, because his feelings were hurt and he all in his feelings and emotional, which I can't stand even hear talk of an emotional man.
This man right here, he decided to take a knife and fatally stab his ex-fiance because she decided to break off the engagement. And instead of just taking loss like a man and just did not want to move on with his life, he didn't want to try to just, excuse me, he didn't want to just try to come up with a simple solution to try to help get this out of his system. He just go and do this. And you know what this is? This is Steve Stevens all over again early this year.
And we know that the guy who killed 3 people at a Planned Parenthood in Colorado was accused by 2 ex-wives of domestic violence.
The Planned Parenthood shooting had nothing to do with toxic masculinity. He did that because he thought that Planned Parenthood was selling baby parts.
Also, the shooters had unfettered access to highly powered, fully automatic guns, but listen, I am not here to draw conclusions.
Gun regulation? Oh, no. We're not opening that can of worms. Now, let's continue with a video where I claim that all men are encouraged by society to kill as many people as possible.
But the connections between toxic masculinity and mass murder get even scarier, because more and more mass acts of violence are being committed by far-right extremists, and deep-seated misogyny is often a pillar of hateful ideology. Some have even called toxic masculinity a gateway drug to other extreme views. Take the 22-year-old who killed 6 people in Santa Barbara. He wrote and vlogged his frustrations about feeling like a loser because he didn't receive attention from women. He wrote, "I will punish all females for the crime of depriving me of sex." He also held racist resentment towards black men who had girlfriends, and new reporting shows that he was interested in Nazism.
Elliot Rogers wasn't part of the alt-right. He was an incel. Those are two completely different things.
Or the Norwegian mass murderer who killed 77 people and wrote in his manifesto that men aren't men anymore, but emotional beings that are there to serve the purpose as a never-criticizing soulmate to the New Age feminist woman goddess.
So a man kills a bunch of people because he says that men aren't masculine anymore, and your takeaway from that whole situation is, men should be less masculine.
The alt-right preys on male insecurity and promotes its violent, toxic masculinity as a source of pride. Ahead of the Unite the Right march on Charlottesville, the white supremacist website The Daily Stormer called on its members to take the streets and profess that their membership has problems with women and feels emasculated. Then, the same website mocked the appearance of Heather Heyer, who was killed by a white supremacist that day. In fact, a lot of what defines the alt-right bog of the internet was born out of a specific hatred of women. From the trolls who attacked female gamers in Gamergate.
Ah yes, the infamous Gamergate hashtag. The hashtag that was born out of pure, unadulterated hatred for women. A bunch of ugly, white gamers were just sitting at home, tweeting away, browbeating women. It had nothing to do with the fact that gaming websites like Kotaku and them tried to start a fucking war with actual gamers. It had nothing to do with the fact that games journalism was now kowtowing to a bunch of shitty people like Zoe Quinn or Anita Sarkeesian. Oh, no. And it most certainly had nothing to do with the fact that the gaming community as a whole is being infested with a bunch of social justice idiots who couldn't care less about video games and only cared about pushing their agenda. No. It's all about sexism.
To men's rights activism, which sees feminism as an existential threat to men's rights.
Men's rights advocacy is not sexist. Are there a few MRAs that are sexist? Yeah, probably, but I highly freaking doubt that that's the entire movement. From what I understand, it's just a bunch of guys who want to have an honest conversation about the stuff that negatively affects men, like the fact that men tend to serve more jail time than women for the same charges.
To pickup artists who prey on male insecurity about not having sex or not having enough sex and then selling them tips on how to act more like a douchebag in hopes of seducing women. Listen, if it didn't work for Gaston, it's not gonna work for you. Haven't you seen the end of Beauty and the Beast? Or lingo, like the insult cuck, which is meant to emasculate men whose partners cheat on them.
Yes, because nothing is more masculine than watching your wife get fucked by another dude while you're sitting in the corner with your thumb up your ass.
Or being red-pilled, where men miraculously wake up to the fact that feminism is secretly about achieving female world order, where everyone is forced to watch beaches and French braid each other's hair, which it is totally not.
You're right. It's not about that stuff. It's about being way too sensitive. It's about identity politics, and it's about advocating for people to get high-ranking jobs based on their gender, not based on merit.
Just listen to Richard Spencer, white supremacist and the guy who made corduroy evil, talk about women's rights.
Feminism has seduced many women into thinking that, oh, men are wrong, I need to be myself, I need to have a career, I need to do this. They wake up, they're 45, they're living with cats, and they are extremely unhappy.
Quick question. What's the right-wing equivalent of going full McIntosh?
And what binds all these disparate strands of toxic masculinity that the right feeds and foments together? Who is their alpha male? A man so toxic, he glows orange. So yes, women would rather spend the night with a pussy than be grabbed by it. Cause masculinity doesn't have to be defined by being tough or having a lot of sex or buying a bath bomb shaped like a grenade because otherwise bubble baths are too feminine.
The reason men don't take bubble baths has nothing to do with masculinity. The reason men don't take bubble baths is 1. Your hands get pretty, 2, you're literally sitting in your own filth. And I don't care how many candles you put in that bitch. That's still nasty.
Because increasingly, for both men and women, our safety, our communities, and hell, even our mental health, and definitely our presidency, depend on redefining what masculinity is.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Masculinity, the way it is perfectly fine. The idea of masculinity is perfectly fine. But the problem with the guys in this video is that they don't understand the fact that masculinity is a choice. You choose to have masculine traits. If you don't want to have masculine traits, that's perfectly fine. You can do whatever you want. No one's forcing you to be masculine. There's not no fucking men Gestapo forcing you to, I don't know, fucking like BattleBots or whatever the fuck it was. I said it earlier in the video and I'll say it again. Any dude that's complaining about we need to fucking change the definition of masculinity just cares way too much what other people think. The problem is not masculinity. The problem is that you just don't just care too much. For example, cars and vehicles and stuff like that, engines and shit like that, that's seen, knowing about that kind of stuff is like seen as a masculine trait. I don't know that shit. I don't know anything about cars, anything about trucks, anything about vehicles. I can barely comprehend what the make and model of the damn thing is. I guarantee 90% of the people watching this video know more about cars than I do. Now, am I going around talking about, oh, we should change the definition of masculinity so I don't have to learn what fucking cars are, or else I'll be a social outcast? No, I don't go around like that because I don't give a shit. So again, to close out the video, masculinity is a choice. If you want to be masculine, go right on ahead. If you don't want to be masculine, fine with me. Anybody that actually is going to berate you for not being masculine is a piece of shit, and don't listen to them.